am so pleased to be able to welcome this gentleman that's our keynote speaker tonight. And I will tell you a little story, and I kind of cleared this with him several months ago, that it would be okay for me to share. But it was 2022, our first MOKA Conference in Bentonville, and that's whenever I first met Scott. And he sat at the head table with his coworker, Jake McLaughlin, and Tommy Edison and I. And Tommy Edison was our keynote speaker that year. And we got to know each other pretty well. We had a lot of fun and laughs. And we had a game one night because based on what Tommy used to do on his YouTube videos on object identification things. And so we had Tommy and Scott and Jake all competing against each other, trying to identify various objects. And it was hilarious. And I actually have like a blackmail video that I didn't put out to the world wide world, but I still have it. And I went back and watched it a couple of months ago, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is really hilarious. So anyway, Scott was, what would I say? You were like the mature one of the three, and you did very well in holding it together and keeping those two in check. But it was really good. It was a lot of fun. And so whenever I was thinking about getting a speaker for this year, Scott was one of the first ones on my mind to bring in here, because I know he appreciated being there and had a lot of fun at that first conference. So he's a great sport, he's funny, he rolls with anything that you throw at him. And so I appreciate what he does for the blind community. He started off at Alpha Point. Whenever I knew him, he was working at Alpha Point in Kansas City. And since then, he has gone on to become the executive director of American Council for the Blind. And so with that, I will say let's welcome Scott to the podium.
I only need the microphone just slightly higher than Debbie uses it. That's all I'm going to say. But it really is a pleasure to be here with you all. Thank you, Debbie, for the invitation and for all the work you do. I know it's a labor of love for sure. So I told Debbie we were sitting having dinner a few minutes ago, a little while ago. And I told her in a surprising twist, I'm not going to talk much about myself tonight. So that seems to be what, no matter where I am, whether it's an Uber or no matter where it is, it's like, so are you totally blind? That kind of stuff. Those of us who never get those questions quite a bit, right? You end up talking about yourself and things about yourself you probably don't want to tell other people all the time. But I am the executive director of the American Council of the Blind. And it's a national membership organization. We have over 60 affiliates, geographic, meaning mainly state affiliates. Of course, we have a great affiliate here in Oklahoma, a great affiliate in Missouri, a great affiliate in Kansas, a great affiliate in Arkansas, so we hit all the MOKA areas, but and then of course our special interest affiliates as well. And so being here with you all and having been in Bentonville previously for a MOKA conference, it's quite an honor. So I'm going to talk to you about something tonight that I've been thinking about for a long time, and something that I think is really important, and hopefully it will resonate with you. I'll sprinkle in a little bit about me, just so you'll have a little bit of my story. But my story is, each of our stories are unique, whether you're sighted or blind or low vision or whatever it might be. Your journey and your story is yours. You own that. And so I think that's important. A lot of people say, oh, you have this eye disease, or you have this condition or this situation. I know exactly what that's like, or somebody else told me this. And that can be true. We can have certain things that are similar, but the way we move through that is going to be unique to us. And so I will share a little bit about my own journey, but I was diagnosed at age of 8 with retinitis pigmentosa, or RP. And there's a story in that. There's a story in all of these things. I think all of us who have lived with some level of visual impairment can have some really good stories for people if they want to hear them, and then some that maybe didn't turn out. You even can't laugh at them today, unfortunately. But at 15, I was told I would be blind by 40, and at 15, 40 seemed really old. Now 40 is like, oh my gosh, I think I remember what that was like. 40. But I want to talk to you tonight about expectations. And it's something that, to say that it's been on my mind is one thing. To say that it's been on my heart is probably something different, means something different. And it truly has been all the way around, because we joke about certain things that happen as people who are blind or with low vision. We can joke about being in situations. We can joke about them, but they can also be angering, depending on what the situations are and what's out there about what people think we can do, or how people treat us in certain situations. For example, asking the person who's with you what you would like instead of asking you what you would like, things along those lines, which I know can be very frustrating. And so I want to start with a story here. My wife Jane, who gives her best to each of you, we've been married 31 years as of this past December, and she put up with me for a long time, so it's good. But our quote unquote courtship, I'm not sure if that word is used anymore, but we met. We talked on the phone. I first called her when I looked her up in the phone book, if that gives you guys an idea of how long ago this was. Yeah. For those under the age of, 40, a phone book is a book that had some pages colored white in the front and some pages colored yellow in the back. The white ones were for individual people with sometimes their address. And in a strange twist, you had to pay more money to have your address left out than you did to have your address in it, which I always thought was funny. Kind of like unleaded gas. Like, I've never understood. It doesn't have lead in it. It should cost less, but it doesn't. It would cost more back in the day when you had regular gas. Anybody remember regular gas? I mean, it's like, now people call it regular unleaded, and I'm like, that's confusing because we used to have regular gas when I was a kid. And so I looked her up in the phone book and called her, and we spoke several hours through a couple of phone calls. We had met at a bank where she was working and where my company, we did our retail banking, and so I met her there, and then I looked her up in the phone book, and we talked to her where it went out. But we had our first date in January of 1994, got engaged in April of 94, and got married in December of 94. And that was 31 years and a little bit of change ago. So she has been with me through essentially the entire journey of my vision loss. And I'm going to tell you guys, I may use some terms this evening that someone in the room disagrees with. I'm going to just go ahead and apologize ahead of time. But I don't get hung up, frankly, on a lot of those phrases. I just don't. You'll hear me say vision loss, visually impaired, vision challenge. I used the term vision challenge one time to someone on my staff at ACB, and they were like, what? And I said, I don't know. I thought it sounded better than something else. They were like, yeah, please don't use that very often. So I don't use it that often. But one day, Jane and I were talking, right? And so, as you know from this story, right, there's a lot of, we've been together a long time. We have one child, a 24-year-old son named Will, our only child, and which for him means he gets all of the attention and, all of the chores and things because he still lives at home. And I'm not sure he has any intention of not living at home, frankly. But we, of course, love him dearly, and he's a very intelligent, very smart young man. and movies and other things. So anytime I go somewhere, like I was talking to the mayor briefly earlier, I can't wait to tell him about the Batmobile. I think he's going to find that really cool. He'll be like, what? They call it the Batmobile? And he'll love that. But one evening, Jane and I were talking, and for any of you who have a significant other, you'll understand why this could have been an issue. I said to her, well, maybe you should just turn your phone off. Yeah, that was the advice I gave her recently. Now, I don't know about you, but that's usually not the advice I'm looking for, nor is it the advice you typically want to give someone close to you for fear of retaliation, what might occur next. In this case, though, something on her phone wasn't working right. The frustration was building. She was trying everything. Nothing fixed it. So finally I told her, just turn the phone off. She turned it back on, and suddenly the problem was gone. The icon that had disappeared, right back where it belonged. And it made me realize something. Sometimes the issue is not that something is broken. Sometimes something simply needs to be reset. And I believe the same thing is true when it comes to expectations. Because the greatest barrier to performance, leadership, and growth is often not lack of ability, it is low expectations. Expectations placed on us by others, and eventually accepted by us. Tonight I want to talk about what happens when we stop accepting them. And I want to introduce a framework, and I can only do this in Oklahoma. I want to introduce a framework called the expectation saddle. So, expectations are placed on us every day. Some make sense, some don't. Sometimes they're directly put on us. Sometimes they are subtly put on us. Sometimes through systems. Sometimes through culture. Sometimes through assumptions people do not even realize they are making. And the dangerous part is this. Expectations only become truly powerful when we accept them internally. That is when they begin shaping identity, behavior, performance, confidence, leadership, all of those things. Many people are not living beneath their capability because they lack talent. They are living beneath their capability because they have adapted to reduced expectations. And when expectations drop, performance often follows. I intentionally do not call this the expectations gap. I call it the expectations saddle. Because a gap implies that there is distance between capability and the expectation. But I don't want to get us off the hook quite that easy. So, introducing the concept of the saddle. There are three distinctive definitions of saddle. First of all, you've probably heard the phrase, someone is saddled with something. Saddled with a burden of some sort. But there's a much deeper story. A saddle is also the area between two mountain peaks. Now look, let me tell you all something. I am not a mountain climber. I'm not a hiker. Getting from my room to this room is as much hiking as I want to do, just to be blunt. I occasionally have someone say, Scott, would you like to go on a hike?
And I say to them, absolutely not. What would have given you the impression that I wanted to go on a hike? If you have vision, you know I do not give off the aura physically of a hiker. So I don't do mountain climbing. But the saddle is the area in between two mountain peaks. So I want you to think about those two first. Being saddled with something and the saddle in between the mountain peaks. Many individuals spend years carrying expectations they never chose. Expectations imposed by employers, teachers, families, organizations, society in general, and sometimes those expectations become heavier than the obstacles themselves. So, a place of uncertainty is where the saddle between two mountain peaks comes in. A place where progress can feel risky and direction unclear. But this is also where most growth happens. Most transformation happens there. Not at the top of the mountain, but in the uncomfortable place between where you were and where you're going. The third definition of the saddle is the seat of the rider. A place of direction, control, movement. At some point, every person faces a choice. Now, I will tell you, as I mentioned, I'm not a mountain climber or a hiker. Guess what else I'm not? A horse rider, or whatever the other term would be for that. Now, I rode horses when I was younger. We would go to places when I was younger. Now, I've always been a big guy, okay? I've always been a big guy. And we would go to ride horses I'd go with the family, right? I have two older brothers and a younger brother. But we'd go somewhere, and I was going to do horseback riding. It's been a long time since I did horseback riding, probably a good 30 or more years. And what I'll say is, I don't know about you guys who have been horseback riding, but I never got the horse called like Daisy or Buttercup. No, I got Chief, Prince, King, And that always told me, it was almost like I could hear the guy, he didn't want to yell in the back and say, "Bring out the big one." But that's basically what the guy was saying. So my experience in an actual saddle on a horse is limited. And I admit that. And so, at some point, every person does face a choice. Will I continue carrying expectations handed to me by others, or will I take ownership of the direction of my own life? That is the expectation saddle, the intersection of burden, uncertainty, and agency. Low expectations are difficult to confront because they're often disguised as kindness. People lower expectations and call it empathy. They lower standards and call it support. But support and limitation are not the same thing. Support increases capability. Limitation reduces standards. And confusing those two things can create damage that lasts for years. The real issue is often not inability. The real issue is the normalization of reduced expectations. And once those expectations become normalized, they become invisible, socially acceptable, rarely questioned. That is what makes them dangerous. People tend to rise or fall to the level of expectation placed on them and accepted by them. That is true in schools. It's true in organizations. It's true in leadership. It's true in teams. It's true in communities and in personal identity. I want to say something carefully. Sometimes society describes people as inspirational for doing ordinary things. And I'm sure some of you have experienced that. While encouragement matters, I think we should occasionally ask a deeper question. Why was that surprising? Why were you surprised that I was capable of dressing myself as a blind person? Why were you surprised that I was actually capable of maybe getting an Uber or a Lyft or riding on an airplane? Why was someone surprised and thinking that I did things that other people do on a daily basis with no question? And so, as we think about what is expected, when we think about what's put on us, and maybe what we put on ourselves, certainly expectations, they can be helpful, they can be good. But I want to briefly think about how often what we call inspirational or inspiration reveals the expectation underneath it. If someone is seen as extraordinary simply for contributing, leading, parenting, working, traveling, or living independently, then we have to examine the assumptions attached. The issue is not the achievement itself, typically. The issue is the expectation attached to the person performing it. Low expectations can sound positive on the surface while quietly reinforcing limitation underneath. That brings me back to the phone story and the danger that I took in telling my wife she should just turn off her phone. The issue was not that the phone had lost capability. It still had everything it needed. Something simply needed to reset. I believe many people need that reset when it comes to expectations. A reset in how they see themselves. A reset in how organizations assess people. A reset in how leadership develops talent. A reset in how society defines capability. Because many of the most limiting beliefs carried with them were not originally theirs. They were absorbed, repeated, accepted over potentially a long period of time. And leadership begins when we stop allowing outside expectations to determine our inside standards. Not by denying that obstacles exist, because they do, right? Let's be real, they do exist. Obstacles exist. We have to overcome in certain ways. And we find ways to do that. I tell employers, they talk about hiring people who are blind or with low vision. I said, you want to hire a problem solver? Hire a person who's blind. My gosh. I mean, we have to find ways every single day to get things done in a different way. Maybe it takes longer, maybe it's a little harder, depending on what it is. But we have to find ways to get things done in a world that was not built for us. But by refusing to reduce identity to those obstacles, we help to build and rebuild and reset those internal expectations and standards that we've been reducing for way too long. I do not believe the question is, what are you capable of? I believe the deeper question is, what expectations have you accepted that are limiting you? and what happens when you refuse to lower them. Because expectations shape lives. They shape confidence, performance, leadership, opportunity, and human potential. So tonight I want to leave you with this thought. Do not allow others to quietly define the limits of your future. And do not unintentionally place limitations on others through reduced expectations disguised as support. Because people frequently become what is expected of them. And when expectations rise appropriately, people often rise with them. Thank you for having me here, Debbie. It's been a pleasure.